Over 60? Discover 4 insanely bad carbs to avoid and 4 transformative ones to embrace for health. George's world spun on the axis of nostalgia, yet it felt like that axis was wobbling. The very carbs that once held his life together, fluffy bagels, buttery croissants, and the infamous caramel scone that he cradled in his hand at the Maplewood Cafe, threatened to unravel it. He stared at the scone, that golden crust glistening with sweet temptation, his mouth watering. But in the back of his mind, the words health risks echoed louder than his stomach's pleas. As he took a tiny bite, George felt the warmth of past moments flood over him. Coffee dates with Mary, Sunday brunches with friends, laughter mingling with sugar. Yet beneath that warmth lay an unsettling chill, the sobering reality of his doctor's visits, warnings, and the thinning veneer of his vitality. He glanced across the cafe, spotting Mary animatedly chatting with friends. She was radiant, transformed since adopting a healthier lifestyle. He felt like a ghost haunting the vibrant celebration of life he no longer felt part of. George had taught history for decades, narrating tales of resilience. Why then did embracing change feel like betrayal? The morning spent with Lily, young, eager, bright-eyed, had peeled back layers of his long-held dietary beliefs, each layer revealing the hidden truth of health that he had avoided. She spoke of transformative foods that energized, of meals that nourished rather than destroyed, her passion igniting curious sparks in him. When she challenged him to reconsider certain habits, he felt his resistance crumbling, a danger to his comfortable routine. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. That evening, at the onset of unease, the specter of doubt gnawed at him. Who was he? A friend's laugh echoed in his mind, dismissing his new interest as yet another phase of a midlife crisis. While grilling steaks at their regular Saturday night barbecue, the camaraderie came alive. But George now felt disconnected. He observed the rich, fatty cuts of meat, the buns thick with carbs, and the platters overflowing with chips. Each bite that others enjoyed felt like a tug back to the past, resisting the push toward a healthier future. The upcoming Maplewood Town Fair loomed, a tradition steeped in the comfort of heavy foods, laughter, and shared stories. George contemplated setting up a booth, advocating for health among friends and neighbors. But the weight of tradition became an anchor, pulling him deeper into his own historical narrative. Would he be tearing down the fabric that held them together? Anguish washed over him as he grappled with the thought that perhaps sharing this newfound knowledge meant alienating the people he'd shared his life with. Just days away, George stood at the crossroads of comfort and change. He felt the urgency rising as familiar faces approached, laughter ringing in the air. Comfort redefined, yet unmarred by the health risks that lingered. Would he step into that light, or would it swallow him whole? The decision was heavy, thick with expectation, just as he teetered on the edge, ready to confront not just his friends, but the very history of his existence. The question spiraled in his mind. Could he redefine his legacy without becoming a stranger to those he loved? As the days passed, George found himself at a critical junction, a moment suspended in time. Each sunrise brought a renewed commitment to understanding this new path, fueled by Lily's spirited approach to health. As he stood in the kitchen, staring into the depths of his pantry, a growing awareness flickered through him. The crumpled wrappers of empty snacks lay strewn near his countertop like discarded relics of a former life. These were not just snacks, they were the habitual comforts he had clung to in his routine. Yet in this light of newfound clarity, they began to feel more like shackles than comforts. The Sunday morning following the barbecue, he made a deliberate choice. Instead of his usual pancake breakfast, he prepared oatmeal infused with cinnamon and fresh fruit. As the warm, sweet aroma filled the kitchen, a glimmer of hope blossomed within him. He took his first bite, the flavor dancing on his tongue, surprisingly satisfying. It felt less like deprivation and more like awakening. With each chew, memories of Mary's excitement about her meal choices flooded back. He remembered her words, "Figure out how to enjoy the embrace of health." The decision to experiment with his meals was exhilarating, yet daunting. He made a plan to explore colorful vegetables, ancient grains and legumes, foods he'd overlooked for decades. This was not merely a diet change, it was a declaration of intent, a shift toward fully engaging with life instead of passively consuming it. With every recipe he tried, George learned not just about nutrition, but about himself. Cooking became an intricate dance of flavors and colors, reminding him of his love for history. Recipes turned into narratives, each ingredient telling a story of origin, culture, and innovation. He felt a flicker of long-abandoned passion reigniting. He was the historian in the kitchen, not just chronicling the past, but creating a fresh future. However, shadows of doubt loomed over him. The looming fair haunted his thoughts. Would he really be able to advocate for healthy living amidst the gastronomic tradition that was so intricately woven into the fabric of his community? The persistent notion that he might be labeled a pariah when sharing his journey gnawed at him. What if the newfound knowledge he wished to embrace became the wedge that pushed him away from those he held dear? The fair approached with an urgency he couldn't ignore. Each day the anticipation felt heavier, pulling him into its gravitational orbit. Should he face his friends and risk being scorned for his choices? Or should he remain silent, compromising his own beliefs? After a long day filled with self-reflection, he pulled out a small journal and began to write. His heart raced as he crafted a proposal for his booth. George's Journey, Embracing Health in Every Bite. It was as if he were daring himself to leap into the unknown, to express rather than suppress. He explored the contrast between comforting tradition and personal responsibility. By nightfall, George had never felt more alive, yet fear held him back from committing fully. The words he wrote spoke to a truth still buried within him, demanding to emerge. Could he truly step forward, redefine his past, and still remain anchored to the friendships he cherished? The impending decision loomed like a storm cloud, galvanizing him into action. The time had come to face not only his friends, but his own turbulent history of choices. As he gazed at the horizon, where tradition met transformation, he knew it was more than about food. It was about embracing a new identity. But as he closed his journal, a word echoed in his mind, pushing at the confines of his comfort. Confrontation. Would he rise to meet the impending challenge, or retreat to the comfort of his old path? As the days slipped by, the atmosphere in George's kitchen became charged, a magnetic field of potential swirling around him. Each chopping of vegetables serenaded his newfound dedication, yet the looming prospect of his booth left his mind tangled in knots. He began meticulously documenting his journey, arranging statistics about nutrition and the impact of processed foods on health like artifacts in a museum. This was his preparation, but it felt more like armor, a shield against the vulnerability he feared would come when he opened up to those he loved. The night before the fair, he sat at the kitchen table, a delicious array of freshly prepared dishes laid before him. They spoke of vitality. Vibrant stir-fries and hearty salads bore testament to his commitment. But beneath the surface, unease brewed. The thought of facing his peers weighed heavily upon him. He stared at the colorful spread, grappling with doubts that clamored like unwelcome guests at his mind's door, demanding his attention. What if his friends poked fun at his choices? What if they dismissed his efforts as a phase or an attention-seeking gimmick? With a sigh, he pushed his plate aside, the sounds of sizzling pans echoing only to him in the solitude of the moment. He grasped the journal, pages filled with thoughts and aspirations, longing to manifest his vision. Inspiration surged within him, and he scribbled furiously, pouring his heart into words. "Change begins within," he wrote. "To embrace a new life, I must confront the past that lingers." It felt cathartic, but the knowledge that tomorrow would demand boldness sent trepidation coursing through him. As the sun rose the next morning, George's heart raced. He dressed with purpose and glanced in the mirror, noticing the faint cracks of uncertainty in his reflection. Today would be more than just an exhibition of food. It was an unveiling of his identity, one he was still grasping to articulate. He rehearsed explanations and potential dialogues in his head, envisioning confrontations, laughter, and even disdain. The possibility of criticism drummed in his ears, but clenching his fists felt empowering. If he could seize this moment, he could seize his life. Arriving at the fair, he stepped out of the car, pausing to inhale the crisp air around him. Colorful vendors mingled, laughter and chatter creating a symphony of community. As chaos swirled, his resolve crumbled momentarily, thoughts whispering insidiously. What if they don't accept you? He steadied himself. What if they do? Setting up his booth, George lined up his culinary creations, each dish infused with passion and intention. He arranged pamphlets that explained his philosophy, sharing his path from historical indulgence to conscious choices. But as visitors approached, he found himself wrestling against the instinct to shrink back, thoughts turning to shadows. Each greet was a step deeper into vulnerability, the weight of expectations palpable. Then a familiar face broke through the crowd. Sarah, a longtime friend with laughter that danced effortlessly through the air. As she approached, George felt the tightness in his chest give way to a sense of comfort. "What's this?" she asked, gesturing toward the vibrant dishes. For a fleeting moment he hesitated, tongue-tied, the fear of judgment clawing at his throat. Then he squared his shoulders, the lessons of the past flooding his resolve. This was not merely a display of food, it was a piece of him he was attempting to share. "I've started a new journey," he said, words tumbling out. "It's about health and nourishment, and redefining how we see food." Her eyes gleamed with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "Oh, really? Let's taste it then. Show me what this journey is about." George took a breath, a mixture of hope and uncertainty sparking within him. As he served her a sample, he found himself teetering on the edge of revelation. Could this be the first step towards transformation, not just for him, but for his friends as well? Yet beneath his eagerness, fear simmered. Acceptance wasn't guaranteed, and rejection could sting sharper than any knife. With each choice he made at that booth, he confronted not only his past, but the future that beckoned. The moment demanded action, clarity, and courage, pushing him toward the brink of a personal breakthrough. As the day unfolded, he wondered if he might not just redefine his identity, but perhaps alter the perceptions of those around him. But the deeper question loomed larger in his mind. Would this journey truly resonate with those he cared for, or would it divide him from friendships he had cherished? George's heart raced as more friends gathered around his booth, their murmurs weaving a tapestry of curiosity, skepticism, and excitement. He meticulously plated more samples, the colors of vegetables splashed against the white dishes like a painter's palette. But the bravado he had summoned was quickly juxtaposed against the gnawing fear nestled deep within him. Would these bold choices be met with acceptance, or would he bear the brunt of ridicule? As Sarah sampled the first dish, a kale and quinoa salad, her brows knitted for just a moment, a slight hesitation that sent unease crashing through George's mind. "It's different," she finally said, a hint of apprehension coloring her voice. I'm not sure I've had kale like this before." "What do you think?" George asked, his voice steadier than his heart felt. This was pivotal. He needed validation, not just for the food, but for the very essence of who he was becoming. "It's fresh. I can taste the effort you put into it." Her sincerity danced in her eyes, and George seized the moment. "I really want to show everyone how food can change our lives. It's not just about eating, it's about nourishing ourselves in a different way." A small crowd began to form, drawn not just by the aroma, but by his passion. That vulnerability, that ache for connection transformed under their gaze into something different, an invitation. An impulse surged within him, compelling George to delve deeper. What if we start a conversation about how our choices affect our health, about what we can do to celebrate food instead of merely consuming it? As he spoke, he noticed head nods and glimmers of interest. People weren't just tasting the food, they were tasting his conviction. He began discussing the importance of real ingredients, how hiding behind process didn't have to be the norm. With each bite they took, George felt an invisible bridge forming, a connection evolving inch by inch. But as enthusiasm bubbled, another part of him twitched. Confrontation whispered as well. A group of his longtime friends appeared, and he held his breath, dreading their usual banter that could just as easily tumble into mockery. Mark stepped forward first, arms crossed, bearing a knowing smirk. "So you've turned into a health guru now, huh?" George's defenses rose instinctively, an old reaction from days when self-doubt festered like a hidden wound. "This isn't a fad, Mark. I'm serious about my health and what I want to share." His pulse quickened. "Yeah, but do you really think everyone wants to eat this stuff?" he retorted, gesturing dismissively at the dishes. The laughter from Mark's circle echoed too close to home, perched on his insecurities like vultures. George felt exposed, a flicker of shame and determination battling inside him. "It's about more than food. It's about choice. Look at what we consume and how we feel. If we don't start being intentional, we're just allowing corporate interests to dictate our well-being." The air shifted perceptibly, a moment when silence filled the gaps between clashing opinions. Mark's smirk faltered, and curiosity cast its spell on the others. "Okay, I'm listening," Mark said. "But what do you want us to do? Just stop enjoying food altogether?" "It's not deprivation, it's exploration." The words flowed from him with an unexpected fervor, newfound confidence lacing his voice. "Imagine a life where we don't just consume, but savor, where we enjoy the process of creating and nourishing. It doesn't have to be bland or tasteless." Their faces turned to each other, curiosity mingling with skepticism. The tension he had felt began to morph into something else: ability, clarity, and perhaps even resolve. With every movement, every explanation, he edged closer to reclaiming not only his health, but possibly the acceptance he feared he might lose. But as cheers began to rise from some corners of the crowd, a flicker of doubt still lingered. Would this newfound acceptance translate to real alliances, or would his friends soon revert to their old habits, pushing him away back into obscurity? The tension hung thick, teasing him with possibilities. Only time would tell if this moment could stretch into something greater. The crowd's murmur began to shift towards eagerness. Maybe he could turn these conversations into deeper connections. As George observed the faces around him, he realized his journey was reshaping not just his life, but potentially the lives of those he cared about as well. But the next question loomed large in his mind. Could he sustain this momentum, this transformative phase, or would the voices of doubt rise again, pulling him back into the shadows? George's breath hitched as the crowd's applause echoed in his ears, transforming the anxiety of his previous encounter into exhilaration. He could feel the shift, connections were sparking, but doubt, like a persistent ghost, still hovered nearby. Was he truly ready to take on the challenge of redefining food in this skeptical environment? Surrounded by friends old and new, George clung to the swell of hope that had filled him moments earlier. Yet lingering in the back of his mind was a familiar voice, a whisper reminding him of his previous failures.
Overcoming the dismissive tone of Mark felt like climbing a mountain, and each inch of ascent had taken a toll. Just as he felt bolstered by support, a heavy thought intruded. Could this newfound attention sustain itself, or was it a fleeting moment? The memory of past attempts to make changes flooded back, the expectations heaped upon him, coupled with the abrupt turns of rejection. He wasn't merely facing culinary critiques, he was confronting himself, his past, his thwarted aspirations, and a raging current that promised to sweep him back into obscurity if he stumbled. Could he navigate this terrain of personal and professional identity without being swept away? "Let me show you something," George called, his voice louder than he intended, catching the onlooker's attention. He snatched up a vibrant carrot adorned with a crown of leafy greens, and, holding it high, declared, "This isn't just a vegetable, it's a symbol of the journey we can embark on together. The crunch, the flavor, it's meant to be celebrated." The crowd leaned in, captivated by the unfurling passion in his expression. George felt a warmth radiating through him as he invited interaction, encouraging them to contribute their thoughts. People began sharing their memories tied to food, grandmas cooking in the kitchen, evenings spent trying something new. Each revelation revealed layers of connection, moments tied through experiences that George realized he could leverage. He thought back to that kale salad. Maybe its complexity mirrored not only his cooking, but his quest for acceptance. Each ingredient told a story, and if he could weave those narratives together, he could foster genuine engagement. "What if we started a cooking group?" George proposed, the idea bubbling up in a rush. "One where we experiment with these ingredients and explore our relationship with food. We could make it a space for everyone to learn and share." The energy in the crowd shifted again, a hopeful tremor rising through eager nods. He glanced at Mark, who remained skeptical but intrigued, a far cry from the derisive figure who had taunted him moments ago. George saw a glimpse of willingness to participate, to maybe even change. Yet deep down, a twinge of uncertainty gripped him. How would he handle criticism if this cooking group didn't flourish? What if he couldn't meet expectations or navigate the complexities of personalities that would inevitably emerge? These questions formed an unsettling knot in his stomach. With a determined breath, he snapped back to the present. "Let's start with simple recipes that foster our connection to food," he continued, channeling his nervous energy into excitement. "We'll document everything, share stories, and create our own cookbook." The crowd erupted in applause again, their enthusiasm pushing away his lingering apprehensions momentarily. As excitement burgeoned, George realized a flicker of clarity amidst his fears. This journey was not just about transforming food, but reforging connections with others. Perhaps that was the change he sought, both personally and professionally. But amidst this revelation, a new challenge loomed. How would he balance this group without losing sight of his own evolving identity? As the crowd continued to debate the possibilities, George sensed that the time had come to face a deeper question. How much of himself was he willing to invest into this new path, and could he handle the weight of expectations that lay ahead? The cooking group was taking shape, but George wasn't entirely sure how to navigate this new terrain. A mix of exhilaration and bewilderment washed over him. Would he be able to manage the diverse personalities and expectations he knew would unfold? He had a vision, but could he translate that into a feasible plan? In the days that followed, George began taking meticulous notes. Ideas blurred into the pages of his journal, alongside sketches of potential dishes and recipes. Each evening he pored over the contributions from the crowd, tracing the common threads that linked their culinary experiences. Their stories were vibrant tapestries, and he felt a responsibility to honor them by creating a space that reflected their collective journeys with food. But clarity collided with doubt. Every new idea prompted an unsettling cascade of questions. What if the group fell flat? What if his recipes didn't resonate? The thought of pouring his heart into something that didn't succeed gnawed at him. It mirrored the fear of being the sole architect of his fate, and that daunting task felt overwhelmingly larger than him.
Determined to stay connected to his roots, George revisited his old favorites, testing and tasting them anew. He captured the essence of each dish, hoping to marry nostalgia with innovation. At times he found solace in cooking alone, lost in the simmering pots and sizzling pans, feeling the rhythm of his kitchen gradually return. Yet the moment he pondered sharing again, the doubt tightened its grip. Was he still the same chef who once felt so in command? He decided to reach out to some potential participants, curious about their cooking preferences and expectations. A small group coalesced around him, a mix of skeptics like Mark and eager food enthusiasts. George organized a preliminary gathering under the warm glow of fairy lights in his backyard, hoping to break the ice with casual interaction. That evening, he stood before his group with a nervous yet determined heart. "I want us to explore not just recipes, but our relationships with food," he began, pacing slightly, glancing from one face to another, searching for acceptance. "Let's express ourselves. I want each of your voices to shine in this space." He presented a simple dish, a refreshed classic of roasted vegetables spiced with unexpected herbs. As they sat around the table, the food became a bridge. Stories surfaced, laughter intertwined with a few skeptical remarks from Mark, who claimed, "Still too basic, George." Each critique struck a chord deep inside him, but this time he channeled his response into a more resolute path. "Let's add our own spins next week. I want this space to reflect all of you." The next week, he encouraged each member to bring an ingredient that felt uniquely significant. The ideas flowed, excitement sparking new recipes, and George was amazed at how their discussions shaped the character of their group, knitting together diverse cultures and backgrounds in ways he hadn't anticipated. Yet, as exhilarating as the reciprocated enthusiasm felt, he felt the shadow of pressure grow heavier. As the first planned cooking session approached, George spent the night staring out at his kitchen, pulsating with the remnants of warmth from a summer evening. He sensed the impending reality that lay ahead. The outcome of their collaborative effort weighed on him. What if he couldn't lead them? Amid the anxiety, a thought pierced through. It wasn't solely about the meal, it was about the transformation that each participant was undergoing. What if this was less about George and more about growing together? As he mulled over the idea, tension coiled within him, but perhaps in embracing the possibility of shared vulnerability, others would lift him too. With the sun dipping below the horizon, he prepared to lay out a final game plan, contemplating if he had the courage to surrender his fears to the collective spirit of his group. But the clock was ticking closer, the pressure mounted. Could he rise to meet this challenge, or would old patterns of fear derail him once again? As the sun rose the next morning, its light illuminating his kitchen, George felt the weight of anticipation coiling tightly around him. Today was the day, the first cooking session of the group he had nurtured. The roar of fears echoed in his mind. Would they really connect? Would they find joy in his vision? With each passing hour, the minutes seemed to stretch, burdened with the gravity of potential failure. In an effort to channel his anxiety, he meticulously prepped the ingredients. Chopped vegetables lay in neat rows, vibrant colors bright against the stark white of the cutting board. His mind raced through last-minute checks, the menu revisions written hastily in his journal, half-formed thoughts swirling like a pot on the stove, boiling with tension. His internal monologue sounded like a constant drumbeat. What if they hated it? What if Mark challenged him again? He resolved to keep his focus on the task at hand. Cooking had always been a sanctuary, a refuge from uncertainty. As he sautéed garlic, a familiar scent wrapped around him, grounding him even as his mind drifted to predictions of doubt. He couldn't let fear consume this sacred space he was creating, not just for himself, but for everyone involved. With the doorbell's chime, reality snapped back into focus. George opened the door with a cordial smile, unable to suppress a pang of trepidation as friends, new and old, filed in, each carrying their unique ingredient nestled safely in their hands. He welcomed them with exaggerated warmth, carefully curving his words to reaffirm his leadership role, to build a sense of belonging. As they gathered around the kitchen counter, George encouraged shared dialogue about their ingredients, each story a thread weaving them closer. Mark stepped forward, opening a glossy packet of unusual spices. "This," he declared, "is probably a game-changer." The mixture of skepticism and determination in Mark's eyes ignited a different kind of resolve within George. He realized Mark's sharpness wasn't just a critique, it was a challenge he could either shy away from or embrace head-on. "This is a space for experimentation," George countered, feeling a surge of confidence. "Let's combine our ideas." The energy shifted, and he could see it. Cooks becoming collaborators, skeptics becoming allies. As the group prepared the meal, George felt something shift deep within. They blended flavors, each interaction a stepping stone toward collective creation. He was no longer the solitary chef carrying the burden of responsibility. Instead, he was a facilitator, supporting shared creativity while nurturing individual expressions. But just as he began to relish in this newfound identity, a moment of doubt crashed back into his consciousness. What if they failed? What if the dish flopped, leaving them disappointed? Would he still be seen as a leader? It was in this moment, one of vulnerability, he decided to share his concerns. "I'm nervous about how this will turn out," he admitted, his voice steady yet trembling, "but I trust in what we're creating together." The group paused, surprise flickering across their faces, before breaking into supportive comments. Their affirmations fueled his spirit, erasing the last remnants of his doubts. Together they set the oven timer and waited, each breath an exhale of anticipation mingled with anxiety. As the aroma filled the kitchen, their collective anticipation echoed through the space, weaving a rich tapestry of connection. He felt more than the pressure of leading. He felt the awakening of transformation, not just of a dish, but of relationships. As the timer chimed and they plated the food, George's heart raced with excitement and trepidation. He realized the journey wouldn't end with this meal. It was merely the beginning. Just then, Mark turned to him, an eyebrow raised. "I hope next time you surprise us," he said, his challenge hanging in the air, igniting another flicker of determination within George. Caught between his past hesitations and his emergent role as a group leader, George left the evening with a nagging realization that the true test lay ahead. Could he continue to foster this environment of growth, or would he falter under the weight of responsibility again? With the next session fast approaching, he was left questioning yet again, how far could he push both himself and the group to discover their true culinary potential? Dawn broke with a gentle light, washing over George's kitchen, while remnants of yesterday's success lingered in the air. He awoke with a renewed sense of purpose, a stark contrast to the anxiety that had clawed at him before the first cooking session. Today would be different. Today he would put into practice the lessons learned, the moments of vulnerability shared, and the camaraderie forged over simmering pots and laughter. He took a moment to breathe deeply, acknowledging the challenge ahead, not only to create a delightful dish, but also to encourage his group to push their culinary boundaries further. Folding his hands around a steaming mug of coffee, George contemplated how he could surprise Mark and the others. A flash of inspiration ignited a flicker of excitement within him, but it was quickly shadowed by the possibility of failure. The thought of Mark's raised eyebrow and challenging remarks made his palms sweat. George was determined to show them all that beneath his quiet demeanor lay an adventurous spirit that thrived on creativity. Infusing unusual ingredients, experimenting with flavor pairings, this was the day to break conventions and ignite their collective passion. As they gathered for the second session, George exuded a visible determination. Each member entered with enthusiasm, their anticipations palpable as they contributed ingredients and ideas. There was a sense of community forming, a connection deeper than just cooking. They were on the brink of something dynamic, yet George's internal struggle persisted. "Today," he began, his voice steady, I want you to think beyond the recipe. Let your imaginations guide you, and don't hold back." He watched them nod, their excitement tangibly filling the room. However, the gnawing fear tickled the back of his mind. What if his encouragement led to chaotic experimentation? What if they found disaster instead of delight? Mark snickered. "Okay, chef, you better be ready for some surprises then." A mixture of amusement and challenge radiated from him. Instead of retreating, George met Mark's gaze steadily. This was a pivotal moment. He could confront this challenge and not only establish his authority, but also ignite a spark of innovation in the group. The session unfolded into a whirlwind of colors, spices, and animated discussions. George felt himself stepping back, observing as enthusiasm transformed into bold experimentation. Their ideas collided, and the kitchen erupted with laughter and debate, a dance of flavors and creation. Each dish formed revealed a piece of their identities, both as cooks and as budding friends. But just as he felt the exhilaration of shared creativity soaring to new heights, a reoccurring thought crept back into his mind. Was he merely a facilitator or a true leader capable of steering this crew through the unknown? He found himself oscillating between priding himself on their collaborative spirit and confronting the nagging doubt that he might not be the driving force they needed. As dishes were plated, a whistle pierced the noise, a tune of urgency emerging from the simmering pots. "I think we made a mistake," someone shouted, staring wide-eyed at the bubbling mixture gone awry. Panic shot through the group, but instead of folding under pressure, George inhaled deeply. "Let's taste it. Disasters often lead to the best surprises," he urged, embodying the adventurousness he wanted his group to embrace. The moment turned electric as they tasted what moments ago felt like an impending failure. Laughter erupted as unexpected flavors unfolded, and criticisms transformed into collaborative improvements. George marveled at the transformation. They weren't just cooking anymore, but evolving as food creators. Yet amidst the joy, a deeper revelation pricked at him. He wasn't just guiding them, he was actively learning to become comfortable leading through uncertainties. As they crafted their own unique dishes, George recognized this was his growth as much as theirs. As he dished out portions, the atmosphere morphed from apprehension to triumph, yet his internal questioning remained. Would they be ready for the larger themes he wished to tackle in cooking? Was this just a beginning, or had they only scratched the surface of their culinary evolution? And then Mark leaned toward him, a challenging grin settling into place once more. "Next time, how about we reinvent a classic dish? Show us your bold side, chef." The challenge hung heavily in the air, a weight of expectations resting on his shoulders, igniting both anxiety and determination. It was clear that another testing ground lay ahead, and George wondered where this adventure of exploration would lead him. How would he balance the courage to innovate with the responsibility of guiding others? The real question loomed. Could he take the leap and surprise himself too? The days that followed were charged with anticipation as George reflected on Mark's challenge. Reinventing a classic dish, what an audacious proposition! Each evening, while navigating the delicate interplay of his work life and his personal culinary journey, George's mind swirled with ideas. He envisioned French classics, Italian staples, and soulful Southern dishes yearning for a modern twist. Yet each idea came with gnawing uncertainty. What if his vision didn't resonate? What if his choices alienated rather than united? He wrestled with his own self-doubt, flickers of insecurity casting shadows over his excitement. Each night he jotted down concepts, doodling flavor pairings, only to crumple the pages, thinking them too bold, too unorthodox. On the night before their next session, he stood in front of the stove, simmering miso-stuffed tomatoes, forcing himself to gain clarity. As aromas enveloped him, he felt an itch of inspiration. This would not be a standard dish. He would elevate tomatoes, turning them into vessels of adventure. With each integration of unexpected flavors, sweet miso, tangy feta, fresh basil, He imagined how the dish might challenge the palate and ignite creativity within the group. The dream of the dish ignited a small flame of courage deep inside him. Could he embody the fearless spirit he sought to instill in others? That morning, George awoke with a sense of possibility dancing in his chest. He was determined to take the leap, to stand confidently before his group, not as a passive facilitator, but as an active leader ready to inspire transformative tastes. When the session began, the air thick with excitement, George stood before the group with a determination he hadn't fully embraced before. "Today, we're going to reinvent a classic," he announced, his voice steady, conviction evident. He shared his concept, explaining how he had taken tomatoes, basic yet full of potential, transforming them into something unexpected. Mark raised an eyebrow, his expression a mixture of intrigue and skepticism. "And what's wrong with the original?" he challenged, arms crossed, a playful yet serious edge to his tone. George felt a wave of vulnerability wash over him. He could have retreated, dampened by doubt. Instead, he leaned into Mark's challenge. "Nothing but comfort can be the enemy of growth. Sometimes we need to shake things up. Let's create a new tradition around this classic." The group rallied with renewed energy, diving into flavor discussions and ingredient brainstorming. They debated, laughed, and questioned, reminiscent of their previous session, but with a sharper edge. George felt his confidence grow as he invited their contributions, encouraging them to test boundaries that felt daring, perhaps even reckless. As they began assembling their pieces, a cacophony of ideas harmonized into a symphony of culinary creativity. George moved through the kitchen, glancing at everyone's progress, mentoring where necessary, but mostly allowing them the freedom to explore without limits. Just as they began plating their dishes, someone called out, "This miso thing, what if we added some heat?" As if ignited by a hidden match, discussion erupted, surrounding spice and acidity, the excitement palpably rising. George felt a rush of adrenaline, invigorated as he watched their imaginations flourish. But in that moment of collective creativity, George's earlier fears resurfaced. What if their concoctions birthed chaos rather than culinary delight? Would he still be able to pull them back if things went too far? Then, amid their flurry of activity, George's internal debate stirred. Reflecting on his role, he realized that his path would not always be one of control. It would often require surrendering to the collective genius around him. He embraced the role of guide, not dictator, as doubts melted away into willingness to explore. As the first plates were set in front of each member, a silence drifted through the kitchen, anticipation wrapping around them like an embrace. The moment was heavy with potential, but thick with uncertainty. "Let's taste what we've created," George finally said, the words echoing like a declaration of defiance against his own reservations. Reluctance mingled with eagerness as they each took their first bites. What once felt risky transfigured into exhilaration. Reactions varied from wonder to disbelief. A cacophony of flavors exposed the power of collaboration. Yet as the excitement buzzed around him, George couldn't shake the growing realization that running a kitchen was akin to mastering a symphony, and he was barely beginning to find his rhythm. The echo of success rang, but beneath, the whisper of anxiety loomed. The workshop felt like a turning point. George found himself at the intersection of burgeoning leadership and personal struggle. As applause filled the room for their adventurous dishes, Mark's teasing voice broke through. "So, chef, what's next? More tradition breaking? I'm ready for the sequel." The challenge gleamed in Mark's eyes, shifting something inside George. It was clear that this creative evolution had only just begun. He now faced a daunting question, one that pierced deeper than the plate. Could he continue to harness this newfound spirit into broader culinary endeavors, or would he falter when the stakes grew higher? He paused, contemplating the weight of the path ahead, feeling the tension coil in his stomach. What bold move would he make next? The weeks that followed were filled with a charged sense of trajectory. George's journey as a culinary leader evolved from a simple cooking group into something more comprehensive, a community centered around health, exploration, and shared experiences. He felt a deep-seated confidence brewing within him as they tackled classic dishes with inventive twists, but with each new session, he sensed an even greater challenge looming ahead. One evening, after a bustling cooking session that had seen bowls of vibrant fusion-inspired dishes line the countertop, George gathered his group around the table. They reveled in their success, laughter and camaraderie filling the air as they shared stories tied to the flavors they had created. Yet, as the evening drew to a close, a part of him felt an unmistakable pang of ambition, the desire to take this community's momentum further. "Next week," he began, the words spilling forward with conviction, "we're not just going to cook, we're going to host a community showcase."
The room erupted with curiosity and excitement, and George felt a rush of energy. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, eyes sparkling. "Let's share our journey with the neighborhood," he explained, envisioning tables draped with colorful food displays, music layered over the intoxicating scents wafting from his kitchen, and a gathering that could spotlight the transformation that had occurred within them all, not just in culinary terms, but as a cohesive group. Time shifted as anticipation electrified the group. They brainstormed ideas together, advertising their event through beautiful flyers, showcasing each person's culinary story and encouraging those in the neighborhood to join the discussions on health and nourishment. George felt the threads of ambition weaving tighter, transcending his previous fears. Yet, amidst the bustling preparations, old insecurities occasionally crept back, echoing the ghosts of self-doubt from his past. Would this be viewed as just another phase, just another idea that fizzled out? Such questions raged within him, threatening to dim the light of hope he had cultivated. However, with each passing day leading to the showcase, he pushed those thoughts aside. The effort his group put in ignited his resolve. They worked tirelessly together, creating dishes that encapsulated their stories, blending recipes with unique interpretations. George found that more than ever he enjoyed guiding others, allowing their culinary expressions to shine through. On the day of the event, the sun beamed down as cheerful faces streamed into his backyard. Tables adorned with colorful dishes created a feast for the eyes, and a melody of aromas danced through the air. His heart raced, not with fear, but with an exhilarating sense of purpose. As he observed neighbors mingling, sharing laughter, and sampling each plate, George felt validated, a sense of belonging swelling within him. "George!" a voice broke through, and he turned to find Mark grinning ear to ear, gesturing toward a plate of miso-stuffed tomatoes. "This is what I'm talking about! You really did it!" As the crowd clinked glasses and exchanged eager bites of cuisine inspired by their weekly sessions, George felt the culmination of his inner transformation come to life. His role had transformed from a solitary teacher to a catalyst for shared growth. The dynamic between him and his friends shifted as acceptance blossomed. They had supported him, but most importantly, he had learned to advocate passionately for the health journey they now all believed in together. As the evening rolled on, George took a step back. He marveled at a gathering turned celebration, a gathering built not just on food, but on connection, exploration, and collaborative growth. Amidst the laughter and shared stories, George realized he had successfully merged his identity as an educator with his self-styled passion for culinary health. Here, he stood not as an individual ensnared in history, but rather as a dynamic force of growth. By the night's end, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and a collection of culinary successes, George experienced a profound sense of achievement. He had not only transformed his relationship with food, but had successfully nurtured a community rooted in health and support. It was a polished victory, a legacy reborn. As he surveyed the joy radiating from the group, he felt more than just satisfaction. He felt a solid confidence and a recognized competence in his role as a leader. There was an undeniable shift, an authentic transformation from ghost to architect, one unafraid to explore, confront fears, and inspire others.
In this moment, George knew he had cemented his new identity. No longer was he a reluctant participant in his life. Through courage, he had embraced full ownership over his path. Fueled by newfound conviction, he could now share this journey, inviting others into the fold of healthy living and personal growth. Filled with hope and fulfillment, he posed a question to the group that lingered in the air. What do we want to explore next? As he watched their curious faces light up, he realized this was merely the beginning. This journey, his transformation, had just begun, unlocking a pathway of endless possibilities. And with that, he silently vowed not to falter, but to lead with courage and authenticity, onward into the future. Now it's your turn. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.